Oh. Today's the 20th day of Sivan, the 16th of June, and we are in chapter 3 of Mitzvos HaAmanos Elokus, which means faith in God. And now in chapter 3, yesterday we saw the first five principles of Maimonides' principles of faith. And they are the epitome, they're considered the epitome of the mind, of what we can know about God, what we're commanded to know. Maimonides is considered the highest. It's not that nobody contested this. There was, especially Reb Chazdai Kreskas, who lived about 200, 300 years after him, lived during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. But in principle, in Chassidus and outside of Chassidus, Maimonides is considered to be the highest authority on the mind in general, on what a person can and should know. Okay, so we got up to the thing of predicates, inyan te'arim. I didn't stress it enough yesterday, and I'm probably not going to have enough time today either. We'll get through it as we go on. This thing of predicates is the most important topic in theology. Whenever we talk about theology, knowing God, theology is basically knowing God. Right? Theo is God, and logi is knowing. So theology is about knowing God, and this thing of predicates is the ikar of any kind of theology. This question of how do you predicate God, how do you describe God? So we said that the mind, the top of what the mind knows, the highest thing the mind knows, is mikira mito v'yodea ota kmoshi v'no yodea b'diya shehu chutz meno kmo shani yodea. So first of all, the mind understands that God's mind must be different. It can't be like my mind. It must be more, at least more. It can't be less than my mind, but it has to be more. And in fact, any predicate that I'll say about God, that He's wise, that He's understanding, that He's compassionate, as we'll see, all these things, we have a glimmer of them because we also have some of them. But God's is at a completely different level. It's a different thing altogether. So much so that Maimonides says that in the end, it's as if we don't understand anything of it. Like it's so beyond. But again, there has to be we grasp something of it through our experience. And then the second thing he said is that that God's existence is what allows everything else to exist. There can't be anything outside that has a separate and independent existence from God. And then when you put these two things together, plus the fact that, again, that you can't predicate him. Anytime you try to predicate him, you get lost. Because, okay, so I'll say he knows. What do I mean by he knows? So says the Rambam, if you want to understand what it means that he knows, imagine that you can't separate the knower from the known from the power of knowledge. They're all one together. They don't exist separately. In us, they exist separately because I can be a knower who doesn't know. It could be a brain injury, it could be some other reason, whatever it is, I don't know. But there's also what I know, the thing that I know, and that's definitely separate from me. And even when I commit it to memory, let's say I know what a triangle is. When I'm not thinking of the triangle, there's no triangle in my mind. It's not there, right? So even something that's theoretical, that's not an object, I'm not knowing an object, I'm knowing a truth. But at the moment I'm not thinking of that truth, so I can't say that I and the truth are one. I'm not. I have to bring it back to my recollection. But by God, these three things are one. It's something that the mouth cannot utter, the ear cannot hear, and the heart cannot acknowledge fully. It's beyond us to understand what exactly this means. And this, for Maimonides, is the epitome of the description of God. It's the highest description. Hua yodea, hua yodua, hua muda, hua mada. And he's these three things, and all these things by him are one. So, and now he's quoting from the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe, as we'll see, writes, "V'hodu lo chachmei Kabbalah gam ken bazeh." It says that the Kabbalists agreed with the Rambam at this point. It's very strange. How can you say that? K'mo shekatuv b'pardes me'aramak, as it says in Reb Moses Cordevero's Pardes, which is a philosophical work, which becomes a Kabbalistic work. It's in philosophical language still, and in principle he agrees with the Rambam. That was in the time of the Ramak, Rebbe Moses Cordovero. We're talking about the early 1500s. So up to the early 1500s, everything was fine. The Kabbalists agreed with the Rambam. There was a period of time when Kabbalah and philosophy were very, very close. So the early Kabbalists, up to Moses Cordovero, who's one can say the summary of all the early Kabbalah, they agree with the Rambam that this is a good description of God's oneness. V'gam lefi Kabbalat Arizal, says, also according to the Rizal's Kabbalah, says the Alter Rebbe. It's not the Tzemach Tzedek, he's quoting from the Alter Rebbe. Yatziva milta. This is also true, it also stands. How? Besod hitlabshut or ensof baruch hu al yedei tzimtzumim rabim bekelim dechabad ha'atzilut. It says the Alter Rebbe, this is true up to the intellect of Atzilus. In the world of Atzilus, there you can still say what the Rambam says, that the Chabad, Chochma, Bina, and Das of the world of Atzilus, the world of emanation, which Hashem emanated, there you can say that He is the knower, He is the known, and He is the power of knowledge altogether. But you can't say it higher than that. Why? Why can you not say what's going on here? אך לא למעלה מהאצילות. כמו שכתוב במקום אחר, שאמצע ברוך הוא מרומם מתנשא רוממות אין קץ למעלה ממהות ובחינת חב"ד, עד שמות ובחינת חב"ד נחשבת כעשייה גופנית אצלו יתברך. Because the problem is, and we've seen this already, the problem is that you're saying that God is somehow a mind. Because if you say that this is what defines Him as different than everything that we are, this is what defines His unity. This is what defines Him in the end. This is the highest predicate. That He is the knower, He is the known, and He is the knowledge. All together. And they're all as one, and you can't separate them. That's the highest thing I can say about Hashem. So in the end, I've said that Hashem is mind. He's knowing. That's what He is. He's a knower. What's the problem with that? How can you say that about Hashem? How can you say Hashem is a knower and He's a thinker, let's call it, and He's not a motive?
Because we're limiting Him?
We're limiting Him to one thing. How can you say that the mind is the highest thing? By Hashem, not just the highest thing, that is Hashem. You can define Him as a mind. You defined Him. You said He's mind. And that we can't accept. And that's why he says that in Kabbalah we look at mind as a creation of Hashem. Meaning, in other words, this solves a lot of problems. Rambam has a question. It's a very simple question. He says, can there be, forget about the regular paradoxes. Let's talk about a logical paradox, a real logical paradox that can't sustain. Can God create a triangle that has four corners to it, four vertices? Can you have a triangle that has four vertices? It makes no sense, because if it's four vertices, it's a rectangle. It's a whatever you call it, with something with four vertices. I don't remember, quadra or something. It's not a triangle. So he says it's a categoric mistake. You don't understand what you're talking about. He says, if Hashem is limited to having my mind, then He is also limited by this. But comes Kabbalah and says, no, the whole thing that we call logic, the whole thing that we call geometry, the whole thing we call mathematics, everything, all this is a creation of God. It didn't have to be this way. God could create a universe in which the mathematics would be different, in which there was no mathematics. Everything would be based on something entirely different. There would be no mathematics. It's simply, every time you would take an apple and another one, and you'd start counting them. So one time it would come out 2, one time it would come out 3, one time it would come out 4. Mathematics wouldn't work. Why? Because it's something entirely different. There's no quantity in this world. He could create a universe without quantity. So you can't say that Chabad, that wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, the mind is the epitome of everything. It's a creation like everything else. So God created this. Within the world that He created, this is what we call the world of emanation, the highest part is the mind. Okay, so you can say there that from this perspective of our world, Hashem is the mind. He's the mind of the world. It's fine, okay. That I can tolerate. But above that, above what He emanated, I can't tolerate that. And that's why, as we'll see tomorrow, the later Kabbalists, after the Arizal, had a huge problem with the Rambam, as opposed to the early Kabbalists who didn't contest this. They accepted it because they were more philosophical. Okay, so we'll see this tomorrow.